Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to really unpack complex ideas, make them accessible, get you that solid understanding fast.
And today we're tackling something that, well, it really flips the script on how we usually think about reality.
Yeah, analytic idealism, which in a nutshell is the view that reality isn't ultimately physical matter, but fundamentally mental mind stuff.
Exactly. And it might sound a bit out there at first, I get that. But we've got some really interesting source material today from the Essentia Foundation's Analytic Idealism course.
Right, specifically parts 6 and 7, the final parts, which really dig into the common criticisms and, the tricky questions people raise.
And just for context, earlier parts of the course set up this key distinction between phenomenal consciousness that's just raw experience, like seeing red or feeling warm.
And metaconsciousness.
Yeah.
Which is knowing that you're seeing red, being aware of the experience itself.
Precisely. And that's important because analytic idealism often frames the psychological unconscious as phenomenal consciousness that maybe isn't metaconscious, where perhaps it's dissociated.
Okay, got it. So today's mission is to look at some of those, let's say, more interesting objections people have about analytic idealism and see how the framework responds.
Yep, let's dive in. First up, probably the most common one, the concreteness objection.
Oh, yeah. This is the immediate kind of gut reaction, isn't it? Look, I can kick this stone and ouch, it hurts my foot. It feels solid. That's concrete. How can that just be mental?
It's super intuitive. You feel the impact, the resistance, the pain. Seems undeniably physical.
Right. It's the world pushing back, the tangible stuff.
But here's the twist. Analytic idealism argues that those very qualities, the concreteness, the feeling of solidity, even the pain, are themselves mental qualities. They are experiences happening within consciousness.
Wait, so the pain isn't proof of something non-mental. It's an experience in the mind.
Exactly. The sensation of solidity, the resistance, the hurt, these are all phenomenal qualities being presented to your mind, within your mind. The things you point to as evidence for a physical world are actually prime examples of conscious experience.
Huh. That flips it. Because the alternative, physicalism, says the real world underneath is just, abstract math. No color, no sound, no solidity as we feel it.
Pretty much. Just mathematical structures and relations. So when you really dig into it, that concreteness objection, the feeling of cooking the stone, actually seems to bolster the idealist view. The concrete is the experience.
Okay, processing that. Let's move to the next big one. The private mind's objection. This comes up constantly.
Oh, absolutely. If it's all one big universal mind, why can't I just, read your thoughts? Why don't I know what's happening in China right now?
Yeah, we feel so separate, like locked in our own little mental boxes. Where's the telepathy if it's all connected?
The key concept here, according to the course material, is dissociation. Think about dissociative identity disorder, or DT.
Okay.
There are documented cases where one alter, one personality state, can become literally blind. Their eyes work fine, but there's no activity in the visual cortex. Then the host personality returns and boom, the sight is back.
Wow, so dissociation can actually block sensory input.
Profoundly block it. It shows dissociation can create a genuine barrier to awareness, even for things right in front of you. So applying that idea more broadly.
Our separateness, our private thoughts. Could that be a form of dissociation within a larger universal mind? Like we're alters partitioned off from each other?
That's the proposal, yes. We're like dissociated centers of experience within a spatially unbound field of subjectivity. Our inability to directly access each other's thoughts isn't proof against a universal mind. It's maybe a consequence of how that mind is structured.
And you mentioned research showing alters can interact within one mind.
Yeah, work at Harvard Medical School suggests alters can interact, sometimes even perceive each other visually or through touch within the same person's psyche.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating parallel for how we might interact within a broader mental context.
Okay, that's a really compelling way to think about mental privacy. What about the standalone world objection? The classic, if a tree falls in the forest.
And no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound?
Right.
Does the world just blink out of existence when we're not looking, if reality is mental?
Yeah, does it need an observer?
The answer here is a bit nuanced. Analytic idealism says the world as it is in itself, the underlying mental reality, which isn't physical, does continue to exist, regardless of observers.
Okay, so the base reality persists. But the physical world, the sights and sounds.
Well, the physical world is seen as the representation of that underlying reality on our perceptual dashboard, Think of your senses as the dials on that dashboard.
Like instruments measuring something deeper.
Exactly. And that dashboard display requires an observer, a dissociated alter with senses to register the information.
Mm.
Without an observer, there are no dials actively showing measurements like sound waves being processed.
So no observer means no physical manifestation, no sound as we perceive it, but the underlying reality, the tree falling event in itself, still happens.
That's the idea. The underlying mental reality continues, but its appearance as a physical world depends on observation.
Got it. That clarifies the tree in the forest thing. Okay, next. The autonomy of nature objection.
Right. If nature is in consciousness, why can't I just wish this rain away? Why doesn't the world bend to my will? Nature seems to have its own rules, indifferent to us.
It definitely feels that way. I can't just imagine a mountain into existence.
And the reason, in this view, is that nature exists within a much larger transpersonal field of consciousness, not just within your individual mind or my individual mind.
So it's not my dream, it's more like we're all characters in a larger dream.
That's a helpful analogy.
Mhm.
We are individual dissociated centers within this vast mental field. Our personal wishes and thoughts are contained within our own dissociative boundaries. They don't automatically ripple out and change the entire structure of the transpersonal mind that constitutes nature.
So my mental willpower operates locally within my alter, but doesn't control the whole system.
Pretty much. You can influence your own actions and experiences within your boundary, but you can't just rewrite the fundamental laws operating in the broader consciousness that manifest as nature. Nature has its own mental dynamics.
That makes sense of nature's apparent independence. Okay, how about the shared world objection? This often gets tied to the dream analogy again.
Yeah, it goes, if that's all mental, like a dream, and our bodies are separate, how can we be in the same dream? It feels like we each have our own.
Right. The dream analogy seems to imply total subjectivity, but we experience a shared, consistent world.
Well, first, the dream analogy is just that, an analogy. It highlights the mental nature of experience, but it's not suggesting we're independently hallucinating. Analytic idealism proposes we're immersed in the same underlying mental context.
A shared mental environment.
Yes, a transpersonal field that presents itself consistently to all our individual dashboards as the physical world we observe. We all see the same moon because we're all looking at the same feature within this shared mental context.
Okay, so consistency comes from the shared source, not independent hallucination. But what about the separate bodies? Doesn't that prove separate minds?
Not necessarily. Remember dissociation. Alters in DID feel and act entirely separate, but they aren't fundamentally different minds. Physical separation on the dashboard, our perception of distinct bodies, doesn't automatically mean fundamental mental separation.
Like the lens flare analogy you used, an artifact of the screen, not the underlying reality.
Exactly. The apparent separation of bodies is how our interaction within this shared mental context is represented visually on our dashboards. It doesn't preclude an underlying unity. Integration in DID shows the alters were part of one system.
Okay, that reframes the body separation argument quite effectively. Now, the natural order objection. This feels like a big one.
It is. How can the incredibly precise, stable mathematical laws of physics possibly represent thoughts and emotions in some universal mind? Our own mind seems so, well, messy and unpredictable sometimes.
Right. Thoughts are fleeting, emotions shift. How does that translate into insimation or the law of gravity?
The key mistake here, according to the source, is anthropomorphization. We're projecting the characteristics of our minds shaped by billions of years of evolution for survival on Earth, onto a fundamental universal consciousness.
So we shouldn't assume the universal mind thinks or feels like we do.
Exactly. Our complex cognition, our deliberation, rumination, emotional roller coaster, these likely evolved under specific environmental pressures. Why would the fundamental ground of reality necessarily have those same, relatively recent, energetically expensive features?
So nature is mental just means it's experiential at its core, not that it has human-like psychology.
Precisely. It means reality is a subject of experience, not necessarily that it shares our specific mental baggage. In fact, the very predictability and orderliness of natural laws might suggest something different.
Like what?
Perhaps a more instinctive, less deliberative form of mentation. Think about animal instincts. They operate with remarkable consistency and predictability. Maybe the laws of nature are like the deep, reliable instincts of the universal mind.
Like ingrained patterns of behavior for the cosmos itself? That's an interesting way to put it. Okay, what about the equivalence objection?
This one argues that saying there's a mental world outside us is basically the same as the physicalist saying there's a physical world outside us. Both posit something external, so what's the real difference? Is it just semantics?
Yeah, does it really change anything if the stuff out there is mental versus physical?
Oh, it changes a lot, according to idealism. The implications are profoundly different. Take death, for instance.
Okay.
In materialism, brain death means consciousness is extinguished. Game over. In analytic idealism, death is the end of dissociation. Your individual alter dissolves, but your core subjectivity, that basic sense of I am, rejoins or continues as part of the universal consciousness.
Whoa, that's a fundamentally different outlook on mortality.
Huge difference. That raw sense of being, even without memories or personality, idealism suggests that persists, and beyond death, it changes our view of life. The physical world isn't the ultimate reality, it's a representation, a surface layer hinting at a deeper mental reality, the world in itself.
It brings back a sense of depth, maybe meaning, that strict materialism often struggles with.
Exactly. It echoes ideas like Kant's noumena or maybe even Swedenborg's spirit world concepts of reality behind appearances. Transcendence isn't out there somewhere else. It's right here, underlying our perception. So no, it's definitely not equivalent to physicalism. The implications diverge dramatically.
That's very clear. Okay, let's tackle something very practical feeling, the primacy of brain function
Right.
objection.
This points out that undeniably, hitting your head, drinking alcohol, brain damage, these physical things drastically affect consciousness. Surely that proves the physical brain causes the mental states, right? Which seems to contradict idealism.
It feels like straightforward cause and effect. Physical event leads to mental change.
The issue here is that this objection often assumes substance dualism, separate physical stuff causing changes in separate mental stuff. But analytic idealism is monist. There's only mental stuff.
So what is happening when someone gets hit on the head in this view?
That physical event, the punch, the brain trauma seen on a scan, is itself a representation on the dashboard. It's the appearance of an underlying mental event.
A mental event causing another mental event.
Precisely. The punch is the dashboard view of one mental process, part of the universal mind, another alter maybe, forcefully interacting with another, your individual consciousness. Brain surgery is the appearance of one transpersonal mental process influencing another alter's inner life.
And mental events affecting other mental events happens all the time, even within our own minds, like thoughts triggering emotions.
Exactly. That's perfectly consistent with idealism. The objection only works if you start by assuming a separate causal physical world exists independently, which is the very thing idealism questions.
So the correlation isn't denied, but the interpretation of causation is flipped. Okay. How about the unconscious mentation objection, often linked to Libet's experiments?
Ah, yes. The finding that brain activity seems to precede our conscious awareness of making a decision. This is often used to argue that non-conscious brain processes are really in charge, undermining free will, and maybe the idea that everything is conscious.
Right, the brain decides before we do, it seems.
Again, the analytic idealist perspective brings in the phenomenal versus metaconsciousness distinction. Idealism holds that everything is phenomenally conscious. There's always some experience. What Libet might show is a delay between a decision arising in phenomenal consciousness and it registering in metaconsciousness, our self-reflective awareness of making the decision.
So the decision could still be conscious at a basic level, just not yet recognized by the self-aware part of us.
That's the interpretation. You need metaconsciousness to report the decision after all.
Yeah.
And it's worth noting, the strong claims about Libet debunking free will are heavily debated now anyway. But even taking the results, this delay is kind of expected in idealism. A spontaneous choice in phenomenal consciousness would need time to be processed, re-represented in brain activity, and then become metacognitively accessible via those relatively slow electrochemical signals.
So the lag isn't necessarily proof of non-conscious causation, just processing time. Makes sense. Okay, another big one. Simple unconsciousness.
Yeah. If my body is the appearance of my consciousness, why doesn't my body, vanish when I'm in dreamless sleep or under anesthesia or knocked out? If consciousness goes offline, shouldn't its appearance disappear too?
Good question. What holds the physical form together?
The simple answer from idealism is, we're never truly phenomenally unconscious. Metaconsciousness might fade, memory formation might stop, but some baseline level of experience likely continues.
Always. Even in deep sleep or anesthesia.
There's evidence pointing that way. Studies suggest subtle experiences during non-dreaming sleep. People report inner experiences during fainting spells, even if they look totally out. Pilots in that G4 study reported dreams during blackout.
And anesthesia. People don't remember anything.
Right. The drugs often prevent memory formation. But lack of memory doesn't equal lack of experience at the time. Think about how quickly we forget dreams. There might be subtle, non-remembered, non-metacognitive, phenomenal states happening.
So just because I can't recall being conscious doesn't mean I wasn't at some level.
Exactly. There could be a baseline operating system of phenomenal consciousness that's always running, even when the user interface of metaconsciousness and memory is down.
Okay, that tackles the disappearing body problem. What about the fear of solipsism?
Ah, yes, the worry that if reality is mental, it might just be my mind, and everyone else is a figment of my imagination.
A lonely thought.
Very. But analytic idealism is actually the opposite of solipsism. Solipsism says only one mind exists, yours. Idealism says the entire universe is conscious.
How so?
It posits that every person, every animal, maybe even fundamental particles, are individual centers of consciousness, alters within the one universal mind. From my perspective, you're conscious. From yours, I am. And the rest of the universe, the background, is also conscious, like a host alter.
So it's radically non-solipsistic. It populates the universe with minds.
Exactly. It's panpsychism or cosmopsychism, not solipsism. Far from lonely.
That's a crucial clarification. Okay, moving towards the end, let's look at the cosmological history objection, maybe like Jerry Coyne puts it.
Right. The universe existed for billions of years before life, before consciousness as we know it. So how can the universe exist in consciousness if consciousness wasn't around?
It seems a timeline problem for idealism.
Well, only if you assume consciousness is a product of complex life, which is the physicalist assumption. Idealism says consciousness is fundamental. It was there from the beginning.
So before life, the universe still existed.
Yeah.
As what?
As the universe in itself, a great universal thought, a field of transpersonal experience. What didn't exist was the physical universe as a representation on a dashboard, because there were no biological observers with dashboards yet, but the underlying conscious reality was there.
The thing in itself was conscious, even before life evolved to perceive it in a particular way.
Precisely. The fundamental reality existed. Its appearance as a physical world evolved later with observers.
Okay, last objection. The implausibility of cosmic inner life.
This one comes down to, we infer consciousness in dogs because they act in ways we recognize, yelping in pain, wagging tails in joy. The universe doesn't seem to do anything like that. It looks inert. How can it be conscious?
It doesn't show familiar signs of life or feeling.
Again, it's anthropomorphism. Why would we expect the entire cosmos to behave like an evolved mammal dealing with survival pressures on a small planet? Its inner life, if you will, wouldn't necessarily manifest in ways familiar to us.
It doesn't need to eat or avoid predators.
Exactly. And our perception of it as static is also skewed by our incredibly short lifespans relative to cosmic time. If you can watch a simulation of the universe sped up trillions of times, you'd see constant dynamic activity.
So its behavior might be happening on scales or in ways we just don't perceive easily.
That's the idea. The lack of familiar cues doesn't rule out a cosmic inner life. It just highlights the difference in scale and nature and maybe our own perceptual limitations.
Wow. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground tackling these major objections. It really seems like many of them stem from misunderstanding the core ideas or kind of melt away when you look closely through the idealist lens.
That's often the case. The framework suggests the physical world we experience that feels so solid and out there is more like an interface, a dashboard pointing to a deeper, fundamentally mental reality.
And exploring that possibility does seem to open up avenues for, well, meaning and mystery that can feel lost sometimes. Transcendence isn't somewhere else. It's sort of the hidden background of here and now.
So the final thought, perhaps, is to look at the world around you, look at the dials on your own dashboard of perception, and just wonder, what might they really be indicating about the true nature of things?
What if the fabric of reality isn't dead matter, but this immense field of experience we're all part of? What does that change about how we see ourselves and live our lives?
A profound question to ponder.